Thanks everyone for staying with us. It feels like it's been a long day, but hopefully everyone's feeling inspired and ready for this afternoon session. Just to say what the purpose of this particular part of our meeting is for, really, because obviously we've had a rally, we've had some more in-depth political discussion on different issues, which I'm hearing has been excellent. And this afternoon we've got a number of speakers who are going to make contributions, and then it's up to you to take the floor and ask questions. It's your chance to say what you think or ask these people on our platform what they think about the way forward, or put them on the spot about anything you want. So hopefully comrades will take advantage of that. We'll have a really good discussion. Our first speaker today is Ian Hodson. So Ian is the president of the Bakers, Foods and Allied Workers Union. We heard earlier from Louise from the NEU about the role of trade unions and trade unionists in fighting within and for a new workers' party, a new party of the left, a party of struggle. So Ian's going to say a bit more about trade unions fighting for working class political representation, in particular democracy within any new party that's formed. So take it away, Ian.
Last time I was in the Adelphi Hotel, by the way, we were electing Jeremy Corbyn. It was fascinating because obviously I'd been invited to come and address that meeting, and I got told could I arrive like at 5 o'clock, and I said, it's a political meeting on a Saturday in Liverpool in a hotel. Who do you think is going to turn up for that? And then when I got here, obviously I got here about 6. I got here and obviously went in a bar. I saw people, saw a wedding going on, and I thought, I wonder which room we're in. So I went over to the guy at the reception. I said, hey, where's the Jeremy Corbyn meeting? And it was the one that I thought was the wedding. It was absolutely packed out. People coming to see Jeremy Corbyn because he inspired people, didn't he? He inspired people to want to get involved in politics. He wanted, he opened up the opportunity for an alternative to the failed politics that we'd all had to endure for 30, 40 years, and still having to endure today. I mean, people voted for change at the last general election, and we've got exactly the same. In fact, so much of the same as we've got, we're about to enable the potential for a reform government. I mean, they talk about the left dividing the Labour vote. It's the Labour Party that's responsible for the rise of reform. It's the politicians in Westminster that have allowed reform, and it's poisonous politics to divide and create so much hate and division in our communities. And it's people like Starmer, who claims that he represents and understands human rights, that gives a speech that brings back Enoch Powell in his Island of Strangers approach to somehow believing that that is going to unite all of our communities. We have been so badly let down as a working class, as organised labour, as people that want to see fair and equal opportunity for all in the communities that we live in. They want to see people treated with dignity and respect. We've been let down by politicians who are funded and paid by companies like McDonald's, who then enable them to introduce stuff like zero-hours contracts into workplaces that then spread like a cancer right across the public sector and other parts of the economy, that drive down wages. And we're expected now to believe that all of that has been caused because migrants came over in small boats. We're all expected to believe that the reason they can't get a doctor's appointment has nothing to do with the cuts to the NHS, but because people over in Calais jumped on a small boat and took your doctor's appointment. We're all expected to believe now that the people who are coming here are somehow an army of young men that are going to, invaders from the hotels that they're currently staying in. I don't know whether you know that, but apparently that is what's happening. We're being invaded, according to the politicians, and according to our media, by desperate people fleeing country. And I've got to say this about many of the people that are in hotels like that. Because tomorrow, there'll be a lot of people down there. Those patriots will be at the Senate. I'm not sure which side they'll be supporting, whether it's the British side or the side that lost in the Second World War. But let's be clear, the people who also should be at that cenotaph tomorrow, in many incidences, are the Afghans who are staying in those hotels. Because they are the reason why so many British servicemen and women came back here alive. And far from living in a hotel and being demonised by politicians, we should be making them feel welcome and recognising them for what they did in support of those people that were sent to Afghanistan, many who came from our working class communities, to defend whatever it was that they were sent out there to defend, but yet again let down by the British political class. The politics that we've got in this country, we've had to endure for many a year, for a decade, for many a century. I was in Manchester last night, and I opened my speech about the fact that here we are in Manchester, where 200 odd years ago we started on this march for democracy. And here we are still, in 2025, still hoping it's going to get here. And we are still hoping it's going to get here. And for a short time, I think what we got in July, when Zara made her announcement about creating a new political party, that she and Jeremy Corbyn were going to lead and build together, inspired so many of us. In fact, 800,000 people joined up. They signed up because they were so infused at the idea that finally we will have a party that represents the interests of us, of our class, that promotes our interests, that recognises our need, that we can organise around to fight back against the lies and the smears and the politics that divides and creates hate in every workplace and in every community. But the left being the left, obviously, can never do anything simply. Here in Liverpool, I often get told when I come to Liverpool, that it's not called a struggle for nothing here. If it was a double, that's what it would be called. But it's not, it's a struggle. Now, me, I've lost a little bit of faith. I think I'm safe to say this in here, and it's called Revolutionary Ideas. I was hoping that this was a revolutionary moment. But unfortunately, we've got people at the top of your party who want a reunion. Well, I'm not here for a reunion. And I'm going to tell you this, because at every meeting I go to, when I keep getting, some questions get asked, hold on a minute, we can't form a new branch until February next year. Where's our pride? Who gives us permission? Why do we have to wait for somebody to tell us? If we want to form a branch, we form one. That's what we do. About the issues we believe in as a class, as the things that we want to campaign on in our community, then let's organise it. Let's fight for it. We don't need the permission of somebody in Parliament, and certainly we don't need the permission of MPs who say let's send the army in to smash the strikes in Birmingham. We don't support MPs like that. That's not a future party that any trade unionists will want to sign up to either. So they need to get their heads out of their backside and recognise this is the first opportunity that we've probably had to actually come together as an organised left and actually build a party based on true socialism, on socialist values that represents us and our class, because that's what this party has to be. It's no good making it Labour Party Mark II. I've been there. I was in that party. In fact, my union helped create that party. In fact, Keir Hardie actually used to come and talk to our members at the start of that party in Lancashire and in Manchester. When they stood for socialist values. You couldn't be further away from socialism now inside the Labour Party. But we have to recognise. But we are going to have to fight. And it's going to be a struggle because we've got to win back our workplaces where their poison has been dripped in, which has driven a wedge between unions and the members, where people believe all the lies and the smears and the misinformation and the misrepresentation of what's happening to them. Let's be clear, the reason there is no council houses is because the Tories sold them off and Labour didn't buy and build any more. That's why there's no decent homes to rent out there. It wasn't a Polish worker that came over here and introduced 0 hours contracts. It wasn't. It was McDonald's and their lobbyists that introduced 0 hours contracts. It wasn't somebody from Pakistan or India that came over here and allowed wages to fall through the floor. That was politicians that made our wages crash. Let's be under no illusion. Every decision that's impacted our life has been made in Westminster. That's who's been responsible for the hardship and struggles in our lives. They're the reason our schools are falling to bits. They're the reason our NHS is in collapse. They're the reason we now have to choose between heating and eating. They're the reason. It's never been a refugee, an asylum seeker or a migrant that's come over here and taken anything from us. They've given us stuff. They've built stuff. They've looked after us. And we should stand in solidarity with every single one of them. And we should always say, refugees are welcome here. Absolutely. But I realise I was also invited to talk about the trade unions and what we need to do. But to me it's very simple. We go back to basics. We organise. We talk about the issues that are important. And we put forward the arguments that wins. And those arguments are not going to be easy. It's never easy to explain to somebody who has a perception of their life that's been channeled by a media that's really clever and really good at making people believe what's really harming them. But we've got to give them the facts. We've mentioned some of those facts. What happened to our housing? What's happened to our pay? Who's made our jobs insecure? Who's made the NHS so it's on its knees? We know the answers. And we have to remind people. And we have to go back to basics to talk about these issues. And when we organise in workplaces, we make sure we've got a strong structure of shop stewards. And that structure of shop stewards has to recognise if they can't fight and defend the right of everybody in that workplace, then they don't recognise what solidarity is either. And we must make sure that we take out those that can't stand for everybody. We don't take people on in trade unions and put them in positions if they start to think trans people shouldn't exist. We don't take people on in trade unions. People don't have the right to the same rights that they do. And we shouldn't accept anybody in a trade union that promotes the idea that these refugees or these foreigners coming over here because we don't know where they come from should be deported. That is not trade unionism. That's not solidarity. That's not internationalism. And it's not how our class wins. Our class wins when we stand together and we recognise everybody is is a part of it. And when we stand together as a class, our history has always shown we are unstoppable. Believe in yourself, believe in each other, and build the movement that we deserve. And no matter what those people in Westminster think, they are not our leaders. We are. Solidarity.
I'm going to introduce our next speaker, who is Linda Fisher, who spoke earlier, but is going to say a bit more about being active in Die Linke, the left party in Germany. She's also a member of our sister organisation in International Socialist Alternative over there, so I'll hand it over to Linda. Thanks.
Thank you. It's not that easy to speak after this. I'm going to try my best. Okay, I hope that I can contribute a few lessons from the development of Die Linke in Germany, because also it was a very exciting time. Die Linke has experienced a historic revival and influx of members since 2025. Over 50,000 people have joined Die Linke since January, and in December 24, the party was still at 3% in the polls for the federal election, but in February it entered the Bundestag and Parliament with 8.8% of the votes. So the revival of Die Linke is the organized expression of polarization to the left and decline of the traditional bourgeois parties, especially among young people. For example, Die Linke is the strongest party among first-time voters, and with an average age of 38.7, making it by far the youngest of all parties represented in the parliament. And it was, I think, 2 years ago, it was 53 or something like this. In short, it is a new party of large cities, young people and women. 1/3 of new members are students or in training, and significantly more new members are employed in the health and care sectors, which were the sectors where the working class became a lot more active than in other sectors in recent years. But unlike in the UK, Die Linke has existed for almost 20 years, but before its revival it had fallen into a deep crisis, the fundamental cause of which lies in the crisis of reformism. As a whole, the party was unable to provide a convincing response to the escalating and more complex capitalist crises in the 2010 than compared to the early 2000s, like climate crisis, pandemic, war, refugee movement, etc. And instead, a tendency to adapt to the establishment and the emptying of party structure spread, combined with a destructive dispute over direction between a left liberal pro-government wing on the one hand and the development of a so-called left conservative current around Sarah Wagenknecht on the other. And parliamentarians who override party conference decisions and determine the direction and debates of the party. And I think this also might be a warning for your party how to deal with this. And class orientation, militant and Marxist responses were pushed into the background. And the lesson of this crisis is that there is no market niche for another party that attempts to paint capitalism pink and light green through a policy of the so-called lesser evilism. Like you also said, we don't need a social democrat 2.0, nor for a so-called left conservatism that desires a return to the supposedly good old 1960s, which were not that good, and place of social issues against issues of specific oppression. Instead of emphasizing its interconnections and common class interests, like we said, our class can only be successful if we are united, and yes. So what led to the revival of the left? I think the objective development, the whip of the counter-revolution was decisive. A feature of the new wave of left reformism in Germany, that can also be seen in the UK, I think, is that the rise of the left is a reaction to the rise and threat posed by the far-right AfD, but also the shift to the right by the entire establishment. Yeah? Everyone is saying the same thing, refugees are the problem, whatever. Yeah? But freed from the left conservative wing that left, Die Linke was able to make a difference in the parliamentary election campaign. Die Linke was the only party that focused on social issues and housing, while all other parties only outdid each other in racism. But they said, no, this is just this is not our real problem. The new leadership of Die Linke is more authentic and did not come across as establishment-like, but rather as non-conformist against the right-wing trend of all the other parties and the media, and clearly more working class, working class orientated. And there was a mass election campaign with door-to-door visits, proved to be a central means of activation and integration of tens of thousands of new members or supporters. It was really a very motivating time compared to the year before. Tens of thousands of people have claimed Die Linke for themselves because there's an urgent need for a tool to combat the shift to the right, social cuts and militarism. So the question now arises is how we can make this tool usable for us, for the working class. The basis for this are places, meetings, structures where members can become active and participate concretely in democratic debates and in building the party. A party without democratic structures will fail in its task. I think that is something you are also discussing here in the process of forming the new party. So what next? As in the early years of its existence, Die Linke is faced with the question of the direction of its development. Towards a militant, oppositional, socialist class party with a clear anti-establishment stance and an orientation towards movements, or towards a parliamentary junior partner for the Social Democrats and the Greens, as part of an imagined but not real left-wing camp. And tens of thousands of new members have shifted Die Linke as a whole to the left. The Bundestag MPs are younger and more left-wing than before. The majority in the party, especially the new members, wants the party to be an organizing class party and are much more orientated towards movement and socialist ideas. However, many of them are still very inexperienced and they have never seen a real working class mass party and how to build this. And on the other hand, still the pro-government participation and reform camp remains strong. Die Linke continues to participate in individual state governments and implements austerity policies there. In view of the record poll numbers for the far-right AfD, pressure will increase in next year's state elections to form coalitions with the Social Democrats and the Greens, and possibly even with the Christian Democrats in order to prevent an AfD-led state government. But in a coalition government, Die Linke would be jointly responsible for a policy that paves the way for the further rise of the extreme right. So we emphasize Die Linke has no future if it participates in capitalist crisis management. In the resistance against the shift to the right, social cuts and militarization, we need a fighting socialist party that is fundamentally different from the established party. A party that is not focused on parliaments but organizes resistance from below. A party that fights for a different socialist society. So there's a question, the question of war is one of the most crucial for the left historically, but also like right now. The Gaza issue acts as a magnifying glass in Germany. The many new members helped build pressure so that the party as a whole became active and played a decisive role in organizing the largest Gaza demonstration ever in Germany in September. I already told this morning. But but the debates and conflicts over the Gaza issue and how to deal with questions of militarism and war continue to exist, and a lot of members don't have a clear analysis of imperialism and how it's like connected to capitalist society, but like rather be something in between pacifism or Some on the left believe that a left-wing party can be built on the basis of a few bread-and-butter issues. And Mandani's election campaign, which is very exciting, obviously, but is also being used as a model, to just focus on housing. In the district executive committee of Die Linke, of which I am a member, one member vehemently argued that we must finally return to class issues such as housing, which have made the left successful and which unite us. In times of militarism, I think this is a dangerous illusion and of course a simplistic idea of a class party. The leadership of Die Linke is currently planning a very large-scale nationwide campaign for a rent cap, putting a huge amount of resources on a national and local level on it. It is good that the goal is to go into neighborhoods, promote meetings and self-organization. The approach of wanting to make a concrete difference is reasonable, but in terms of content, the 3-year campaign remains stuck with a very narrow demand for a rent cap, which alone will not solve the housing crisis, especially if it's not linked to the nationalization of large housing corporations. We are committed to a party that combines the bread and butter issues with the struggle against oppression, imperialism, military, war and capitalism, because the party cannot escape armament wars or the right-wing culture war. If the left can achieve this and continue to anchor itself in the working class, then there's a great potential to build a force that can actually push back the far right and build a socialist alternative to this madness. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda, for that very important insight and lots of lessons to be learned if comrades ask the right questions. So I'm just going to say a few words before we move on to our final speaker. I'm sure comrades can't have missed the obscenity of a pay deal that Elon Musk has just had approved by Tesla of $1 trillion. And of course, Musk uses his wealth very carefully, recently bankrolling the legal representation of Tommy Robinson, who thanked him, saying that he would probably have ended up in jail without Musk's support. Maybe so, and it seems that money talks, and perhaps that can give us the feeling that, you know, it's impossible to compete with that, that we're fighting an upward battle. But also, recent events I think show that despite the stronghold that the Musks of the world seem to have over social media, the spread of ideas and so on, that our ideas, the ideas of the working class and socialist ideas, are actually on the ascendancy. So despite billionaires and trillionaires, they can't overcome the realities of the conditions that working class people face. So there was also a campaign in New York, a $21 million campaign funded by 26 billionaires who failed to stop the election of Zoran Mandani despite that campaign. And that was due to an alternative campaign, a campaign of mobilising people against what appeared to be all the monetary odds, mobilising hundreds of thousands of grassroots individuals, young people in particular, in a campaign for working class ideas, for socialist ideas, although not perfect as we've outlined. It shows the potential for the ideas that we are putting forward. Having said all that, it's clear that we need money in a capitalist society. And we consciously do not rely on big business and billionaires to fund our organisation because we don't want to risk becoming beholden to their agendas. So because of that, we rely on the donations of working class people to fund our organisation and what we think is very important work in building the ideas of revolutionary socialism. We set ourselves at this meeting, comrades who come to these meetings regularly will know, we always have appeals for money, because we always need money. We set ourselves a very modest target this year of £2,000, and we've already had pledges from people up and down the country of just over £1,000, but I'm just going to, which is fantastic, yeah. From working class people putting their hands in their pockets to fund our organisation and promoting the ideas of socialism. But obviously I'm going to ask comrades to try and top that up to £2,000 today. And beyond today, if you can pledge some money going forwards, if you can't afford that, those sorts of amounts in the next few days, maybe you could pledge to pay something when you get your next paycheck, when you get your next bit of income, just to help us out. We understand that comrades who are not on big wages, comrades that are on low incomes, will be struggling to make big donations, but we also hope that some people here will be able to make larger sacrifices. And you'll see there's some pledge sheets on your chairs. If you could fill those in and give them to people that are coming round during the course of the rest of the meeting, and thank comrades very much for helping out with that. And I'm going to move us on while you're thinking about that. We'll announce later what we've managed to raise. Mike Foster is a member of PACE, the People's Alliance for Change and Equality, which has been set up in Kirklees. So Ian said we shouldn't wait for Westminster MPs to tell us we can have a branch and have a movement. And that's exactly what we've not done. We haven't waited in Kirklees. We've set up the People's Alliance for Change and Equality, a group of different campaign groups and different individuals organising in solidarity with each other to come together and try to create the embryo of what we think a new Workers' Party should start to look like. Mike's going to say a little bit more about what we've done there. Thanks, comrades.
Hey, comrades. Well, 4 years ago, some of you we've joined Socialist Alternative in marching through the streets of Glasgow at COP26. And we had a great turnout there, and another great turnout here today. But as Matt mentioned in his earlier statement, we now have COP30, which is meeting in Brazil. And instead of opening with a flourish, as we tried to do this morning, the General Secretary of the United Nations said that COP has been a mortal failure and is guilty of huge negligence, which he described as moral negligence towards the rest of the population. Unfortunately, there were some countries not there to listen to him. America, China and India decided to boycott COP30, and they represent 40% of the world's population. We were told 4 years ago that 1.5 degrees or we won't survive. Now, of course, 1.5 has been surpassed, and we face an existential crisis across the world. You don't need me to talk about the floods, about the tornadoes, and about the forest fires. But surprise, surprise, the oil, gas and coal industries are holding back that necessary change. In fact, they get huge subsidies from governments, as well as massive political support. Last year, the subsidies that these companies received from national governments around the world amounted to $7 trillion. So, 4 years ago, when we were marching, we had Boris Johnson in power, and we were just coming out of COVID. Today, as comrades know, we have war, we have militarism, we have the rising threat of the far right, and of course also accelerating inequality. In 2025, billionaire wealth surged 3 times faster than the year before. The world is now on track to have at least 5 trillionaires. And that's what inequality is going to mean. The richest 1% are responsible for as much of the world's pollution as 2/3 of the world combined. In 2024, the richest capitalist nations drained $930 billion from the global south. I could go on, but the comrades here gathered in this room know about inequality. But of course, what they try and do when we point that out, when we point to the super rich, when we point to the billionaire class, that is when they try to blame migrants, the poor, the disabled, the trans community. They just turn up the hate dial. Now you know why. Because they've got so much to lose. In this country, as Ian has explained, we face multiple crises. And how far removed are the billionaire class from the crises that young people and all sections of working class communities face? And now we have a reform leader who's ahead in the opinion polls, who tells us that the minimum wage for young people is too high. He wants to slash benefits for people who are disabled. He wants to lower corporation tax for the super rich. He wants to cut public spending by £50 billion. That doesn't sound like a new party to me. That sounds like a Tory party on steroids. And we have to expose them in the elections next year. Lancashire Council, which is run by Reform, wants to close their 4 remaining dementia care homes. People across the country need to hear about that, don't they? Not about people coming across the channel in boats, but why they want to attack the welfare state even further. What Reform voter, who has joined the campaign to stop the closure of the dementia care homes, said he didn't think by voting for Reform this is what it meant? Well, that's exactly what it means. That is what voting for Reform will bring about. So little wonder then that there is no confidence in the UK political class, in British politicians, which is now at an all-time low. It's desperate that the working class finds a new political voice, one that challenges the wealthy, the privileged, and the self-entitled elite. So like yourselves, we were all delighted when, at the end of July, Zara Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn announced the formation of a new party. We thought this was now the trajectory that we could travel along, as Ian has explained. And of course, all those hundreds of thousands of people signed up for the party. What a shame that that wasn't a membership drive that was launched in July rather than just a sign-up. Because we have wasted all summer waiting for the membership drive to come along. But we in Socialist Alternative have been agitating and campaigning for this party since last year. We were already beginning to define what that party should look like. We were demanding that that party should be working class, should be socialist, should be democratic, should be anti-imperialist and front and centre opposed to the far right and their policies, as well as being against all oppression. We had a very clear vision about what that party had to represent. We went further and we specified that that party should be democratic. But now it seems we will have to spell out what that democracy means, as Ian has done. I've joined hands with Ian and other leading comrades in your party to launch the platform for party democracy. How the hell should we have to do that? But we have to do that because at the moment, the highest echelons of your party are trying to deny us basic democratic rights. So let me spell it out once again in this audience, as we did at our small meeting in Huddersfield 3 weeks ago. We demand that every MP should be subject to the right of recall and should be paid the average wage of the workers that they represent. That there should be something called regular elections. We demand that the membership should be entitled to vote based upon a one-member, one-vote system, and we demand that all branches should participate in the founding conference of that party. Why am I having to spell that out? Because those of you who have attended regional assemblies will realise that we are going down a different path. We also want a party that is going to fight alongside and with the working class, and the only party, in my opinion, that can challenge reform on its terrain and beat them. So the launch of your party was welcome. I think if they launched the membership drive then, we would already have 500,000 members, but instead we have fallen way short with only 50,000. In fact, what's worse is the spectacle that when Zara Sultana said, now you can join up to the party, Corbyn said, no you can't, and instructed people not to do so, and then launched a solo membership drive of his own 2 weeks later. That is not how you found a working class democratic socialist party, comrades. And we stand in solidarity with Zara Sultana, who continues to be pilloried in the press by people who were briefing from your party headquarters against her for withholding the funds that she attracted when she launched the party. Let us make it very clear that she is wanting to transfer those funds and all the data of the people that joined the party, and is being prevented by doing so by your party headquarters for their own narrow factional reasons. It's a disgrace that we have to be talking about this today, rather than eagerly anticipating the founding conference, which is to take place in this city in just 3 weeks. In just 3 weeks, comrades. And as yet, the basis for the selection of delegates has not been announced. People have not been chosen. Louise Lewis, who spoke this morning, spoke at our regional assembly and said, if you want to attract trade unionists into this new party, the first thing you do is that you ensure that delegates are elected by their branches to represent their members at their conference. Instead, what we're going to have is something called sortition. And we all rushed to our dictionaries to understand what that meant. And it is a form of lottery. It will be like the national lottery that has just been relaunched, where a hand will come out of the sky and point to you and say, you are going to conference. Well, me, in 3 weeks' time, I don't have the resources. So they're going to have a slush fund to allow people to go to that conference. But now we're being told that there will be discussions about the founding documents, but the votes will not take place at the conference. Instead, the votes will take online, because all of us will be able to view that conference through some kind of portal. Well, if it's a bit like the Liverpool rally that we all tried to join a few weeks ago, there won't be many participating. And so we think that the founding conference is not getting off to the best start, which is why we've got to re-emphasise once again what we think that party should be based on. And it's ironic and unfortunate that we have to say this is what is necessary. But a party that is democratic is founded on its branches and its members, not on sortition. A party that is democratic will open the door to every socialist of every creed, and there won't be a precondition attached as to whether they belong to a different socialist organisation, as long as they want to support that party. We will be demanding that your party does what Pace did, what Ian did and others in Huddersfield on the streets 2 weeks ago. We took to the streets, we reclaimed the streets for our movement, and we said, your party is here and it is here to stay. And we're demanding that this party should get out of the meetings, should get out of the conferences, call a national demonstration against the far right, and that demonstration will attract at least 1 million people and put Tommy Robinson back in his box for daring to call 120,000 onto the streets of London 2 months ago. We are also saying, and it's tragic that we have to say this, but at the moment the founding documents do not contain within them an electoral strategy, but we think that these elections coming up in May, there should be a Your Party candidate standing in every seat, both in Wales, Scotland and in this country. But it is particularly urgent in Wales and Scotland that they should be competing for the Holyrood and the Senedd elections. But it's equally urgent we should be competing for the council elections, rather than giving Reform a clear opportunity to stand their candidates without a challenge from our side. That would be a huge mistake if we don't launch an electoral strategy at this founding conference. And we are arguing that officers should be elected at this conference and not appointed by the independent alliance of group of MPs. Because if you were to pass those founding documents, you are giving authority to the independent alliance to appoint a general secretary who will then be responsible for rolling out the branches of your party. That is turning democracy on its head, comrades. As Louise said at the Regional Assembly in West Yorkshire, if you were to suggest to the Bakers Union or to the National Education Union that the General Secretary should be appointed by 5 MPs, there would be a stampede to the door. We want to see all officers and an elected leadership subject to recall and not only appointed by the Independent Alliance group of MPs. We don't want sortition, we want to see delegates elected. And yes, it's true, Jackie suggested I talk about PACE. You're probably sick of hearing about it. But last year we launched PACE, and we've had our founding conference on the 10th of May. We've elected officers, we have a bank account, we have a campaign strategy, we're standing candidates in the elections, and I shall not be going to Carrie Murphy or any of the appointed bureaucrats that sit in YPHQ to ask them if it's okay we can do this, and if it's okay we will stand candidates. Because we are standing candidates to ensure that Reform is pushed back into its box, and our Labour Council, which is toxic in terms of the policies that it is pursuing, is thrown out of office and Socialists are brought back onto the council. That's the kind of party that we need. We know from the assemblies that have already taken place, those that found their way to the secret meetings that people were called to. In the case of our West Yorkshire Assembly, people were invited to a Chelmsford meeting the night before, only to realise that Chelmsford is actually in Bradford. But nevertheless, we had people turn up who agree with everything that I've been saying about democratising the party. I want to talk about the politics of this party. But as Linda has said, we cannot talk about the politics of a party that is not founded on democracy. I want to hear from the comrades today, to hear what kind of things you think we should be doing to ensure that party is democratised from top to bottom. But one thing I am certain of, we have not got this far to retreat and surrender to a small clique in London who tell us that this is how the party is going to be run. This party can be a success. This party will be a success. This party will be led by Socialists. And this party is going to be a mass party as long as we remain committed to it. Thank you, comrades.
Okay, I'll tell you that one. Listen, for the party either recognises it's an inclusive party or it doesn't. And if it's not an inclusive party, then it's not a party that we, I would imagine, as Socialists would want to be associated with. I mean, and that's for the idea of what we do. We need to do this anyway. We need to be doing this now. We can't be a real party. We need to be talking about the real reasons. I was hoping that I might have expressed that when I was speaking about, the real reasons why we are suffering, why we are struggling in hardship. I mean, it's not because of the migrant. Without migration, our NHS would collapse. I mean, I remember giving a speech once at a conference talking about the fact that actually, Britain is stealing all of these health workers from these countries that actually need them. By making offers for them to come over here because we won't invest in training. I mean, and that's a genuine, real argument. Because it's true. You know, those countries actually invest in the education for their workforce, and then we steal it because we won't invest in educating our own. And that's the reality, and we need to explain that to people. And we need to explain that actually we have these people, you know, whether it's in the care work, then you know, our parents, people suffer with dementia. You know, friends and relatives, when you get older, you have friends and relatives like that, you know. But the reality is without these migrants, we're stuffed. We need them. We've got an ageing population. You know, and we need people to come over and take the jobs that we can't do. And if we're going to build an economy that works for us all, we need people to work in it. And we can't rely on the pensioners, which is what the Reform and the Tories and the Labour Party seem to want to do. It sends us all back to work or keep us working until we're 82. You know, we need an economy that works, and we need people to come in and do the jobs that keep the economy running. You know, I'm trans. I mean, listen, I would like to get to the bit where we don't argue about the right to exist. I mean, wouldn't it be great, you know, we recognise trans, great, let's move on. Yeah. You know, I mean, to me it's that simple. I don't care how you live your life. What does it matter to me how somebody chooses to identify? What does it matter to me how somebody chooses to love another person? What does it matter to me what religion somebody chooses to take up? Why does that impact me? It doesn't. So, let's just let people be people, you know? I mean, they talk about the nanny society and then they dictate about what people should do and what they should be and how they should look or how they should dress. You know? I mean, it's incredible, isn't it? You know, on trade unionism, I'll get to that because I'm getting old. My memory's going, you know what I mean? On trade union, I've got real concerns about trade unions. Trade unions and the TUC have so tied themselves to the Labour Party that the risk here is that the Labour movement, the trade union movement, gets associated with collapses alongside the Labour Party. The Labour Party, you know, has shown that it's so intent on satisfying its new donors at the expense of working class people and working class communities. And when I say working class, just to make sure everybody knows, I mean every part of our, I mean, it used to be called the labouring classes, and it represents the working people, the non-working people, it represents all of them, yeah? And just to say working class because it's dead easy for me. And I mean, the Labour Party used to represent the different sections, didn't it, of the working class. But it's chose now to protect the millionaires, the billionaires and the trillionaires. It's more interesting. And the trade union movement is linking its car to that horse. And the people in our workplaces that are suffering and struggling, when you go in and talk to them, and you say to them, you know, your life's hard not because of migrants, they go, well, hold on a minute, party you support, the party your union is affiliated to, is taking our political money, says it is. It becomes a difficult argument to win. Because you've got the Labour Party saying it's right. I mean, you know, the Ed Miliband situation of let's do some books dealing with migrants and the cause of migrants. I mean, we have to have a recognition. That's why I said before, we can't have people in key positions in trade unions that believe people are the problem. You know, we have to have trade unions that recognise that people are the solution. And we support one another, no matter how they identify, what they look like, or who they play to. Doesn't matter. Trade unions are made up of collective people. And your party has to be the same. But they must also have one member, one vote. I believe one of the biggest problems with the Labour Party was the ability to block vote. And that's why, you know, the Labour Party's democracy won't work. That's why it will always be a cabal of the people at the top of the party who can control how people will vote because they dish out the jobs. So I believe very firmly that, you know, a branch should be organised in workplaces. I do. I I believe they should elect their delegates to go to their regional meetings, which I do. But their votes should be reflected by a show of hands in the workplace and taken to the meeting. That's what I believe in. And that should be how it's done. To me, that's dead simple. One member, one vote, no special treatment for anybody. I hope that answers the question. I'm not sure if I missed it.
Lyndon's just very kindly foregone the right of reply because I think feels that perhaps a lot of the issues are relevant more to what's happening here. So I'm just going to ask Mike to come back on the points.
Right, well thanks for the questions, comrades. I think they're really important questions as well. By the way, sending solidarity to Tanisha Bramwell, the independent councillor from Dewsbury West in our neck of the woods, said at this meeting last year that she was opposed at this stage to a new party being formed and that we should go down the independent path. Tanisha's joined your party. She wanted to stand as a your party candidate, but can't because we haven't got an electoral strategy. So she's moved politically. I was laughing about it at the founding conference when she decided to identify with this new formation. So that's how people will move under the pressure of events. That's why I wanted to mention it. And I think Tanisha would have a lot to say about LGBTQ rights because she identifies as that. And of course she came under a hell of a lot of criticism and pressure and slander because of that. But I think her response to the question that Alison has asked is, we're not going to surrender this party to transphobes. There are some MPs that hold transphobic views. They are a minority in this party. And therefore it's up to us to ensure that the party adopts a political programme that is very clearly pro-trans rights. And then it asks those MPs, do you subscribe to this political statement? Because if not, we also have the right of recall, and it's time that you stood down as MPs or that you left the party. We're not going to leave because you bigots inside your party come out with statements that is transphobic. I think that would be a mistake. But what do we say to young people? We say to young people very clearly that we have adopted that as a position and that they should join, but they should be involved in the struggle. Now, young people who identify as trans or LGBTQ plus don't need to be told about struggle with it. They don't need lectures from us because they've struggled all their lives. And so the struggle to ensure that this party has that emblazoned across the banner is something that we would invite them to get involved with. But with pace, and I didn't say a lot about pace because many of you were at the demonstration in Huddersfield, but we've set up an alternative prime, and we have young people who subscribe to that group and who have demonstrated in the streets of Huddersfield, and they are all subscribing as well to pace and to the ideals of your party. So I think if we can demonstrate through struggle, and it's through struggle, not through words, if we can demonstrate through struggle that we stand with every section of oppressed society, then the oppressed will join us. If we talk about it and do nothing, then we will struggle ourselves to attract every section of the class to our party. And this, above all else, this party has to be a party of struggle. What do we mean by struggle? It means by getting out on the streets. It means by standing with the oppressed. In our neck of the woods, it means standing with those people who are fighting to keep their dementia care homes open. It means standing with that community, one of whom is here today, who are trying to stop a building development on contaminated land that is releasing asbestos and arsenic into the air. We stand with those struggles. We stand with those that are fighting to stop the closure of the sports centres. We marched, as we did 2 weeks ago, with those people who are fighting for the freedom for Palestine. That's what we mean by a party of struggle, and then we amplify that 100 times. With the authority that your party has got, we don't want it to stand aside from those struggles. It has to be on the picket lines, it has to be on the demonstrations, and it should use its authority to call those demonstrations and get people out on the streets. And that addresses the question that was asked about what should we do about reform if there were to be a reform government set up in this country or elected in this country. Look to how the Socialists are struggling against Trump, and we would have to do the same here. We would be out on the streets. The question that was asked about how do we take up the issue of migration. Look, I've been down to these hotels. I've talked to angry people who have decided that migrants are the problem, and they're pissed off and they're angry. But once you start to dig beneath the issues and find out what they're angry about, they're angry about the same things that we're all angry about. They're out in the homes. The NHS is in crisis. Wages are piss poor. Benefits are being slashed. Jobs are scant and can't be found easily. Those are the issues that this party has to take up and make it clear, as Ian has done. It's not the fault of someone coming across on a boat that you can't get a doctor's appointment. It's not the fault of somebody seeking asylum that you can't get a boat. And we have an acute housing crisis in this country. And isn't it significant that Mamdani got elected in New York by calling for rent control and by calling for homes for everybody? And that's what this organisation, our next assembly for PACE before the end of the year, will be an assembly around housing. And we want to take up the question of rent controls, rent freezes, and ensuring that everybody has a decent right to a home. So we become a party of struggle and not one that just talks about, yes, of course, refugees are welcome here, but they're welcome here, but also we want to have decent services so that everybody can have access to services that they deserve. What we won't do is do what Keir Starmer does, which is to say, oh yes, I'm a racist as well. We'll deport people. We could deport people faster than the last Tory government did. It might not be Rwanda, but we'll find some other countries to send them. That is not the answer as to how to deal with reform. What do we do next? Do we have a plan? Well, actually, we don't have a plan because we're not quite sure where this conference is going to go. But if they choose to go for a single party leader rather than a co-leadership model, then I think we would be encouraging Zara Sultana to stand for election in your party, because I think that she would now, in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of most people here, is far better suited as a leader of this party and could take it forward on clear socialist issues. But I would want to see a leader that is elected, the same as Ian, on the basis of one member, one vote. What we are not going to do is we're not going to walk away, because we have been waiting and waiting and waiting for as long as I can remember. I was part of something called a Campaign for a New Workers' Party that was set up in 2003. So that's 20 years and more that we've been campaigning for a new Workers' Party. Now that we have one, we're not going to walk away, comrades. Now that there is a handful, a cabal that are trying to tell us how this party is going to be run, we are not going to allow them to do that. Neither are we going to abandon a project that gives the working class the potential of having a political voice for the first time in the history of our movement since the Labour Party was first formed. We're not going to walk away from it, comrades. We have a programme, we have an approach, we understand what democracy looks like. It will not be Labour Party Mark II, and we will work, as Claire has suggested, up to the floor of this conference, and after the conference we'll go to the fringe meeting, but we will continue to work for this project, because that is what the working class needs.